Welcome back to another fantastic episode of I'm Gonna Talk and You're Gonna Listen, and I'm your host, Chance Paladin, Yeehaw. Do housekeeping really quick. One thing, if you're new here, or if you're not new here, and maybe just technology is confusing, I work really hard to put in timestamps, and so there's kind of a format. So I try to do a 2-minute housekeeping cleaning, which is just kind of the status updates of me. And then there's the little intro scroll. And then I break out the topics. Try to do a song just for fun or some little thing in between just to break up the blocks. And then at the end, I'm going to start doing an indie author / indie author book. So it's kind of my new format. There's not a lot of housekeeping cleaning from last time, except that I did a massive bunker codes update. I had a huge burst of enthusiasm last night. I got an amazing shout out from Vision Preparedness, and it just gave me this huge surge of energy to completely overhaul the formatting of the bunker codes. So check that out. There will be a link down below. It's my newbie prepper book, and so I think I'll set one of the blocks of this episode aside to talk about that. Also, I don't always know exactly what my topics are going to be yet, because it just depends on how the show goes. But I'm planning on 2 blocks this time. A block about identity, and a block about the bunker codes, and then a block about the end block, which will be the indie show. The indie book spotlight. Alright, so Chance Paladin, the editor person, roll the intro. Yeehaw.
Found a bunker deep in the woods. Supply stacked high, it feels so good. Hiding out neath the leafy hood. Gonna help others try to get through.
Alright, this episode is brought to you by nothing. I don't have any sponsors. So we'll talk about the bunker codes first. So it started. Oh, we have our first guest to talk about his book, The Bunker Codes. Hello, I'm Chance Paladin. I'm gonna talk about the bunker codes because it's interesting. Oh, that's fantastic. Cool. Good for you. So tell me about how this book started. Oh, thank you for having me on the show. First of all, what a fantastic audience. Okay. I wrote the P&W Affliction. Oh, by the way, if you haven't yet, going back to Vision Preparedness for a second, he did a really good interview of me, and I'll throw that link down below as well. I probably answered a lot of this on there, but I was also kind of nervous, and I didn't have like a picture of myself on there because I forgot to send him the picture of me to put on there and stuff, and I was a little... I'll be honest, I wasn't ready for such an amazing interview. That's the first interview I'd ever had, and it was crazy. So if some of this you've heard before because you saw that, then I apologize. But for the new folks, I'm going to try to summarize it. But I suggest go watching that first, because Trent Vision Preparedness is amazing. And it was an amazing interview. But so I'm going to kind of summarize that. The So to talk about the bunker codes, I really have to talk about the P&W Affliction series, which is my fiction series. It's a massive series, near future. Takes place in the Pacific Northwest. And I had been learning things throughout the years because I was concerned that I was going to potentially be the only person that knew anything when the shit hits the fan. And I realized so many groups and so many people were fake. And there's this rule called, was it the Dunning-Kruger rule? I don't have it memorized. Where like the more people know, the more they tend to downplay how much they know. And the less people know, the more they try to overhype how much they know. And in shit hits the fan situations, it's insane. But also, peacetime leaders are very different than wartime leaders. And so I knew a friend of mine had invited me out to go hide for his, it's a thing search and rescue people do. You go hide and then they come find you. And it's better if they have people they don't know. The problem is usually people go out and do this that don't actually know what they're doing, and they just become liabilities. And I did know what I was doing, but I didn't want to be a liability. So I wanted to do a bunch of training first to make sure that I didn't want to get, hashtag, team carried, even though I would have done way better than most people. I didn't, it's not that I didn't like believe in myself. I think I was just underplaying it, and I wanted to be like really, really ready. I wanted to do awesome. So instead of just doing something, I trained for years. And fast forward, years later, I've trained a lot under a lot of different people, a lot of different classes, search and rescue, incident command for like community response, tons and tons and tons of things. And you're like, what the hell does this have to do with anything? So I had put that knowledge slowly over time into my P&W Affliction series as a kind of a way to do it, train it, practice it, learn, learn, train, practice over and over. Because training and practicing are very different. You have to learn it from somebody else before you can practice. You have to train before you can practice. Anyway, as kind of an additional reinforcement and sort of almost like a time capsule, but kind of secret code breadcrumbs to myself in case things happened, in case there were giant lapses of time. I kind of coded everything I learned into my books. Things that most people wouldn't pick up, but I left notes in there to myself. So that way when I go back and read my books later, it kind of like gets my programming going again. Sometimes it's weird, funny things like zone bars. Or in the book, they're called Zorn bars because I think slightly changing the words of branding is hilarious. It's my sense of humor. And I just leave myself little nuggets in every book. And they don't mean anything to anyone else, but they mean a lot to me. And for years and years and years, I was coding my books. Like the DNA of all my books is like everything that I've learned and trained on. And it didn't occur to me until way later I was asking a lot of people, why don't they read the P&W Affliction? And I learned after I heard something 2, 3, 4 times, sometimes there is actually sometimes there's something there, and I couldn't always figure it out. So eventually I would, or I would just debunk it. For example, some people, I would go, why don't you read the P&W Affliction? And they go, well, I only read the Bible. And I'm like, well, I know that's bullshit because you're reading the words I'm saying right now and I'm not quoting from the Bible. So I would immediately dismiss those people. That shit drove me insane. Not literally. But a lot of people would say, oh, do you have it in print? Because I don't read digital. And that used to like really turn me off for a while. I'm like, I tried print before, nobody cared. But after 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 people, I'm like, oh shit, okay, things have changed, or I'm talking to a different group of people now. But in reality, I think the paradigm had shifted away from Kindle and back to print. And my second iteration of print ended up equaling all the Kindle sales that I'd ever done. That was huge, right? So I kept getting this feedback, and if I got enough of it, I could kind of put 2 and 2 together. One of them was, well, I don't read paperback, I only read hardbound. After enough people said that, I switched to hardbound as well, as much as I could. Hardbound, it took Amazon forever to do hardbound. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So when enough people were telling me I don't read fiction, I only read nonfiction, that was not a hard pill to swallow, but that was like looking at something you'd never seen before and trying to quantify it. Like, what the? Who reads nonfiction? What kind of Lovecraftian horror world are we in to where somebody reads what is nonfiction? And I'm like, are you talking about like biographies? Because all that's bullshit. Those are all written by ghostwriters that just make things up. And then they go lie to sell their book of more lies. And honestly, more often than not, those biographies are actual money laundering schemes. You don't think anyone actually buys these books, do you? Like, no, they have some donor buy a bunch of them and throw them in a dumpster somewhere or something. I don't know. There's basements full of books of certain people. New York Times bestseller. It's like, no, your donor, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, well, I am not writing a biography. Nobody gives a shit about me. I am not an interesting person whatsoever. I'm a nobody. Right? But, so I'm like, but this is valid feedback. This really is valid feedback. There's a lot of people saying this. I just don't know what it means, and nobody wants to tell me what the hell it means. So I'm like, how can I do this? I just need something. I just need something so I can, I'll say this bluntly, but throw it back in their face. But what I really mean is just to have some kind of valid response, so I have something to pivot off of. So 2.5 years ago, I'm like, well, you know what? I can do a bunker cookbook because wife and I were on food cards for a long time when we lost our house. And that was pre-Rona, back when there were special grocery stores that sold near expired or expired food at very steep discounts. They still exist, however, the food may as well be the same price. But back then, 2013, 14, 15, you get the idea. This food was like a fifth of the price. You could load up, and I mean, your shopping cart, and I mean just in like canned food and like staple stuff, you could have hundreds of pounds of food in you know, whatever you wanted, beans, you know, chili, like cans. Oh my gosh, it was insane. $500-$600 worth of food for under $100 is, kids these days have no idea. It's never going to be like that again. And so we were stacked to the walls. And we had like the food card, right? And our food card was like, we had the max allowed at the time. Now food cards get you nothing. So back then we could go to we would go to one of these grocery stores, and then we would go to like a Walmart to get the couple of things that they didn't have. Or no, I'm sorry, not Walmart, Winco. Winco back then was amazing. The food was so affordable. So you can get $300, $400, $500 worth of food at Winco for like another $100 and get the rest of the things that the other grocery store didn't have. Exactly the same food. And they would even show you the price. They were like, and Winco was already way more affordable than everything else. So at this point, no joke, the back of our vehicle would be almost stocked to the top with food. Way more food than you could ever eat in a month for like 2 people. But canned food, like prepper food stuff. No junk at all. And we had to like learn all these different ways of just kind of sprucing it up. So I started like, I had already as a joke started writing a recipe book probably 6-7 years prior, just as a joke. And then I started using those recipes like for real, and then like inventing more as I started looking online and YouTube, and I found other people that were doing the same thing. And corned beef hash gets really bland. So, what do you do to it? What can you turn it into? And I just kept turning it into more things and smashing more things together. And that became the fundamental outline for the bunker codes. So if anyone has a really super early edition of the bunker codes, the recipe book is actually at the front, because how I had originally structured it was you pretend you find your bunker, you find the food, and you make sure the food is okay, because botulism is, side note, botulism's actually insane. It's, I don't know, this is kind of weird thing to say, botulism's about as bad as rabies. I don't think people realize how bad most people maybe don't realize how bad rabies is. Botulism's like, in my mind anyway, I equate weird things sometimes. It's really, botulism's really bad. So it's like, okay, make sure the food's okay. And then I figured when you were going to find the bunker, you'd probably have to cook something. And then I had the recipes, and the bunker codes was going to be really, really, really short. And I think originally it's going to be called like the bunker book, until Dex from the Marfoogle News fame came up with bunker codes, which I was just immediately fell in love with it. The name was perfect. And so what had happened though is I realized the more kind of I had to preface how you'd be like checking the stove to cook the food, and then how to check the area to make sure the area was safe, so you'd even know it was gonna, it'd be okay to cook. And then eventually, and then how would you run like different types of stoves and stuff? I don't know. Eventually the book was, I can't remember what the next thing I added was. I think at some point I had realized that throughout the years on different forums, I had like really massive, thorough, long-winded answers to people about random stuff. And Gab, which is why, so that's why like Dex has like top billing, and then I think Gab is right up there too. Gab, I don't know anymore, but back in Gab's heyday, which was like a free speech alternative to Facebook, to put it mildly, that's the understatement. But people would just post like ultra long form, overindulgent, over detailed deep dives into just random stuff. So one example of that is like, I got some kind of rash out hiking, and I just kind of like documented the whole thing and wrote down every single medicine I tried and every single way that I tried that medicine. Tried like maybe 3 or 4 different types until eventually I found one that knocked it out, and I just documented the whole thing. And it's funny, people like, there's no poison oak here. Well, I was walking through it over and over and over. It soaked into my pants. It soaked through my pants. And then every time I tried to touch it, it would get on my fingers and then go to a new spot. It was horrible. It was like a virus, but it's because it's this crazy oil. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. It's all in the bunker code. So that was one example. Another example is like, I had a root canal, and I got dry socket, which is like horrible. It shouldn't have happened, but I don't, freak of the universe, I guess. And so in the middle of the night, we're driving around trying to find something, because of course it's on a 3-day weekend, because that's when dentist stuff always goes bad, is on 3-day weekends. And, find like the last tube that has like a tiny bit of like eugenol left in it, like clove oil, in the baby teething section at like a Target at 10 at night, and then going through all of the trials and tribulations of like trying eugenol, food grade clove oil, not essential oils for an oil vaporator. Anyway, so like all that, I'm like, well, I may as well just throw all this stuff in the book too, since I write these, huge blog posts. I may as well just throw it all in there. So eventually I had done so many things. I had like written so many of the, like transposed all these old blog posts into the book. I got tired of scrolling past the cookbook part over and over and over again, and eventually, so later on versions of the bunker codes, the cookbook's almost towards the end. So that's why. And then I'm like, well, you know what? I may as well just keep collecting more blog posts and that I've written in the past. And then just like flesh this whole thing out with every new thing I've learned too. So I had written a really extensive blog post in the past about all the different types of like OC and CS spray for pepper sprays and bear sprays. I wrote all that in, or transposed all that in there. Because I had saved a lot of these blog posts just in like Word docs, because I had to answer the same question in like a different forum, and I would like repost it. So like crypto is an example. I've written a massive thing about crypto, although I think that may have ended up going in the hardbound like collector's edition. I'm not exactly sure. I had written a massive thing about dogs. I think like the extended version of like the dogs is in like the collector's edition. All the stuff that I kind of deemed is more kind of like soft and squishy went in the hardbound, which is fine. I don't think it detracts. They both are kind of different things. So like eventually for the hardbound, I'm gonna do just a thing about like psyops and put it in the hardbound version. Eventually I was gonna do a Bunker Codes 2, but I think I ended up just putting a lot of that stuff in the hardbound. So, which again, I know it's priced really high. That's because it's a collector's edition. Anyway, I think like the base model of Bunker Codes is like really affordable. So it doesn't hurt my feelings too much. The kind of and like first, so there's kind of two really big, in my opinion, like bread and butters to like the Bunker Codes. The first aid section is massive, at least in my opinion, it is. Maybe it's not massive, but I spent the most time on it. And the battery / electronics section, and that's because like shout out Southern Prepper 1, he gets a lot of battery promos, and in his comments section everyone always asks tons of questions, and he helps a lot of people, and I go into his section and his comments section, and I help a lot of people too. And I just ended up saving and transcribing all of that info that I had told everybody else, and the battery / solar section just ended up being massive. But it was all born from me having to explain what I have now, I think, called like color crayon level to people. Electronics is like it is a giant mystery, and it's magic, and it's insanely scary to people. And even stuff that if you literally just sat and thought about it for like 1 second makes total sense. But if you don't have any like foundational knowledge or experience, it is extremely confusing. And it's not to dunk on people. I know why it's confusing. The marketing and branding around quote unquote solar generators is fundamentally flawed. And there was a certain person, a very, very, very nice person, who was completely confused, even though as soon as you sit there and think about it rationally, it makes sense. But the problem is, like, if you have never bought a quote unquote solar generator before, which means you've never held one, which means you've never looked at it. And a lot of people that are like kinesthetic, where they have to like actually touch and feel and look at the thing and set the thing up before it clicks in their brain, trying to explain a quote unquote solar generator to somebody doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense because they're stupid. They're not. It doesn't make any sense because the marketing behind solar generators is infuriating if you think about it. There is no such thing as a solar generator. It's a word they made up. And you don't, if you went and stuck the battery outside, it doesn't do anything except for just get hot and cook off and get ruined if it's in direct sunlight. You might leave it out there and it might get rained on, and if they're not IPv65 or whatever, like, you're just going to ruin it. So it doesn't make any sense. And the reason why it doesn't make any sense is because they will sell and market these things as solar generators, but they don't even come with solar panels. So another question, I think it may have been a different person. They go, does this thing even come with the cables? And I looked at it and I'm like, you know what? It doesn't even say that it comes with a single cable to even plug it in to begin with to even a wall. In which case, that's just kind of like a backup battery generator. But if it has, oh man, they brought up a valid point. They're like, how do you even know if these come with the right cables? I'm like, you're right. Another time, I think it may have been the same person. They said, how come this thing says that it takes gasoline and some combustion engine or something? I can't remember what the other thing was, and it was Amazon, which I love, and Amazon is the best and great, and Amazon is amazing. Had completely false item description, and that could either be because they are idiots, but not Amazon. Whoever set it up was an idiot, but more likely, they bait and switched the item listing to steal the reviews from it and apply the reviews to something else, which is extremely common with Amazon. So option one, when I said they're idiots, that's happened with a lot of products before, where whoever sets it up doesn't know what they're doing, but whoever's drop shipping the product doesn't have any control over it. They're like two different companies. So it's not even, in this case, the battery manufacturer. It's not even their fault that the Amazon listing is wrong. They're not trying to scam anybody. Whoever set it up and set up the drop shipping company just screwed them. So things like that, I answer things like that. They're all perfectly valid questions. There's no way a brand new person would know. You think Amazon, who I love and is an amazing company, and that can do no wrong. No sane person, no reasonable, rational person would think that Amazon has problems like that. I mean, there's a report incorrect information link. Surely, no. So those are perfectly reasonable things. So I answer them, and it challenges me to actually go look instead of just saying, no, you're wrong, you're an idiot. I mean, there are these people that are like brand new and confused, usually are not only way more right than they realize, right in regarding, have absolutely valid reasons for being insanely confused, but they no, I think that's it. I think they're like the tripwire, and if everybody else just looks into it more, they'll be like, oh yeah, this is confusing. So that helps me with my books too. Shoot, what was the other thing? Yeah, Southern Prepper 1 points out the weirdest, oddest little intricacies that like a few other people. He picks out stupid things with batteries that should like never be a problem. But on these cheaper batteries, they really cut a lot of corners, but they're things that you might not ever notice. One of them is like there being no AC pass-through. So I got this super affordable battery and super affordable panel for my brother, which combined, they form a solar generator. And I made sure it had the right cables. And I had been actually super overthinking it, but the setup was ultra simple. You just had to remember that it had DC pass-through and no AC pass-through. Well, you wouldn't know that looking at the listing, the sale listing, but he had figured that out because he was messing around with it. That's just crazy levels of testing. That doesn't mean it's terrible. It just means it has a specific use case. And if the price is right, something's better than nothing. Because if you're charging it all day and then maybe you're using DC, which is more efficient anyway, you're fine. And then bring it in at night and use it for AC. La-di-da. But he found other ones that like downvolted instead of like tripping the circuit breaker. Those you shouldn't even be allowed to sell those. And Rossman, another amazing YouTuber, calls out a lot of that fraud on his channel. And so you can kind of navigate those things. A brand new person's going to have no clue. And so you get these douchebags in Southern Prepper One's comments, and also Survival Living's comments section, and they'll just be, the people in the comments section will just be such assholes. Oh, this is so easy. LiFePro 4 batteries are so affordable, which is not true. LiFePro 4 batteries haven't been affordable for years. Marine batteries, unless you live next to a marina, haven't been affordable for years. I've debunked all of this. They'll go, this is so easy, but the reality is, for somebody brand new that has no intuitive understanding, primarily because they've never even held one before, it's not intuitive. And the more I wrote the bunker codes, the more it almost turned into like me debunking so many infuriating, like preconceived notions. Like half the tutorial videos and walkthroughs on the Google that I found had people setting up their charge controllers wrong. And so if you screw it up and you just plug your solar panel in directly to a battery, you just like fry it, because you're not controlling the voltage coming in, and making sure that your charge controller is protecting your battery. And yeah, there's a lot of things like that. Your charge controller has to detect your battery first, and then it can protect it from whatever you're plugging into it. And yeah, there's so many. I'm trying to remember some other ones. There was a lot of like food saver videos were just wrong out there at all, completely wrong. I can't even think of them all. I found so many that I was just like, I think I eventually figured that just a lot of preppers were gonna die just from all of like the misinformation and disinformation there is out there. Because of marketing lies, or because a lot of people out there just make a video and they don't know what they're doing. Again, back to Rossman, like he covers a lot of equipment that's just faulty. It'll burn up or it won't do what it says, and a lot of the e-bikes out there are just junk. I think that the lithium-ion batteries and e-bikes, I think, and EVs for that matter, I think is still wildly untested. When a certain battery vehicle company doesn't even have specs or a warranty system to be able to take out and replace their batteries, and it's like an $80,000 warranty to replace their batteries, like, people should realize that we have a huge problem in a society where these batteries really have the manufacture of the batteries have outpaced how to actually deal with them as a society. And, do you have your EV chargers like close to the building, or do you have your EV chargers really far away from the building? And maybe I brought this up before, but you don't want your EVs, in underground parking garages. Certainly not if there's a bunch of residential there. I mean, that's horror waiting to happen. And yet, I don't think, not that there needs to be government regulation for everything, but I'm honestly surprised the government hasn't stepped in and said, look, you guys, you can't put EV chargers next to buildings. But guess what? That's where they are. Like, they're right next to where everybody has to walk by. I think some places have gotten better. There's a certain grocery store that I'm thinking of where they had a couple charging ports right next to the building that you had to walk by, and then they put the rest of them way far out. But then I just heard of another building that they put a bunch of them right next to, the entry causeway area. And I'm surprised that, going back to like another discussion that I've had with some folks about the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, I'm surprised the ADA hasn't said, like, you can't have EV chargers next to where someone in a wheelchair in a van may having to be loaded and unloaded. It seems like they just haven't caught up to that yet, but probably because the EV lobby is really strong, because of green energy and climate change and global warming and Al Gore. We didn't listen. And so I probably answered my own question. That's probably why. But I think that these things aren't intuitive until you get your hands on them. And if it was up to me, if I was in charge, every house, even or like maybe school, I don't know, like every kid would have, like, here's your solar panel, here's your LiFePO 4 battery, a safe battery, and teach every kid, like, this is a solar panel, this is a LiFePO 4 battery, you plug your solar panel and your, again, a LiFePO 4 battery that actually has the charge controller and everything in it. And so every kid has their own little power bank to power their stuff with, and teach them all young, and then slowly build the grid up until every subdivision has microgrids. And what do? You end up with tons of kids that are going to want to be electrical engineers, and then all of a sudden our grid's, independent again and resilient, and job, business continuity, right? Like, I don't know why people wouldn't want that, especially once, we get cold pressed LiFePO 4 batteries and bring that cost way, 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 way down. Build solar panels in America. I don't know, like, kids all having their own power. I don't know. Like, I think it's like a completely opposite, paradigm shift from when we were kids and we were just going through. You might think, oh, that's bad for the environment, blah, blah, blah. Well, the LiFePO 4 battery is going to last the kid like 20 years, first of all. And then, second of all, like, when we were kids, because I'm a boomer, joke, kidding. You know, or Game Boys and stuff, like, well, and God forbid you had like a Game Gear. Do you know how many like AA batteries we went through? Like, do you think that was good for the environment? God only knows how many AA batteries we went through when we were kids, right? And I don't know, like, if all the kids had to like get together to survive or something, they could like, if they made charge controller like head units to be able to link all the batteries together, and you had a bunch of kids, like, they could make a pretty big grid. I would rather have that than these EVs that could just like, it's like thermite on wheels. I don't know. Kind of on a, I kind of digress there, but the thing is, like, those are the kinds of things, same thing with like Stop the Bleed. You know, everybody should have to learn first aid. And so I think that's why like first aid and like batteries, going back to like, what the hell are we talking about? Like, batteries and first aid are like the two biggest things I think in my book. The Bunker Codes by Chance Paladin. Because I think those are the two most important things. I ended up adding firearms way later because I realized I was trying to find like more things that like really, really needed to be demystified. And firearms was on there. And kind of how that all started is James Yeager, Tactical Response, rest in peace. I think he was super dialed in, and he's like, I need to make a video showing how to load a shotgun. Man, I didn't know how. Like, you want to talk about like demystifying things? Once you've loaded a shotgun, a tube fed, it makes total sense, right? It makes total sense. But like, mechanically, if you have no idea, you're like, wait, so I load shells here, and then this system moves these shells up here. Okay, but then how do you unload it? And, you know, and if it's a Mossberg, you have to hold down the slide release, and then you run the pump, which ejects them sort of as if they were like a spent shell. If you've never touched one before, and you've never had someone show you it before, and they've never explained it before, and nowadays there's these really cool semi-transparent animations that show you, that didn't exist back then. There wasn't even like HD video back then. HD on YouTube, even 720p and 1080 is still relatively new. There's still videos online that are like 10 years old that are like in 480 and I don't know, anyway, blah blah blah. The point is, like, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, the shell has to go in there. Okay, you pump it, it goes up there. Okay. I mean, it's simple after the first time, but like it's terrifying. Like, same thing like loading a mag, racking the slide. It doesn't make any intuitive sense. It's mechanical. Kind of like the batteries. Like, there has to be a certain order, and if you don't have anybody to show you, but the problem is you get a lot of people that don't know what they're doing. Firearms, same thing. Tons of people around firearms that don't know what they're doing. Yeah, I wrote it all down, and then the more I wrote, the more it made perfect sense, because if you go find a bunker, I mean, just imagine if you find a bunker and you've never seen a firearm in your life, you're not going to want to pick it up. You're not going to know if it's loaded. You're going to see batteries laying around. You're not going to know what to do with them. And I'm just like, I was watching just some really great YouTube videos where they were finding bunkers and they knew what to do with the stuff inside. Atlas is one, and oh man, yeah, Bush Radical is the other one. Him and his wife would buy properties and they'd find bunkers on the property. And I'm just like, this is amazing. Like, this could totally happen. People, and then I was watching another one the other day. Like, there's YouTubers all the time that find bunkers on their properties. It's absolutely amazing. And I don't know, like, it just makes sense to me. And I wish, selfishly, obviously, because I make money off the book, but I think it would be so cool if, like, this book was in every bunker, and so someday somebody would find the stuff in it. And granted, there's homesteading encyclopedias that are like thousands of dollars that have been out of print for ages that do actually have all the homesteading stuff. There still, to my knowledge, isn't a single bunker book that really goes through it in this detail. There's the last time I looked, it was actually really discouraging, not to throw shade at those other authors, but I think where there would be really good room in the space of bunkers is if Atlas had, like, he explains it from like an engineering perspective sometimes, where it's like explaining blast doors, explaining pressure, explaining moisture, explaining air ventilation. I think there's room in the space for a book like that, definitely. And he explains it better than anybody. My other engineering buddy, unfortunately, shut everything off and ghosted. But Atlas is still around. He explains it sometimes. Like, that would be a really cool book. To my knowledge, there may be some books that look like that, but I haven't bought them all. Because the reviews of them look super hokey. And Bunker Codes doesn't have a lot of reviews either. But the verbal reviews I've gotten, and imposter syndrome is like a real thing, and I still don't really feel like the Bunker Codes super earned from that perspective. But everyone who has read it, which is actually a lot now, I have sold quite a few copies of this book, and I've gotten, many people have told me, like, it's amazing. So I give tons and tons of copies of the book away. So I mean, I think it's good. I reference it all the time. And I do wish that somebody would go through, though, and make kind of a more detailed one that had all those aforementioned things I just said, but also explain how to make a complex, like, mature electrical system with, really good gauge wire to really good solar panels, really good, like, overbuilt controllers. There's people that know how to do this. There's great YouTube channels that explain it. Southern Prepper One has had, I'm forgetting the guy's name all of a sudden. But there's people that just do this their whole lives, that just make amazing solar panel units and battery banks and thermal systems that are just absolutely engineering like masterpieces. And I'm not trying to compete in that space, because if I focus on any one thing too much, then I kind of lose the broader picture. But I think that would be cool, and it would compete on like a very, very like visceral, I think, engineering level. And I think that would be cool, like how to actually build and complete a really robust solar panel system from scratch. Same thing with drones. You can still buy drone kits and build your own drones from scratch. It's not even that hard. Building solar units isn't that hard either. But it takes a lot of time, and you have to hook up everything perfectly. And it costs money and time and space. So anyway, so I think I'm going to cut this segment here. I hope you'll check out the bunker codes. I reformatted the whole thing. I made some updates to the stove area. I built out the stove area a little bit more. I built out the battery area a little bit more to keep up with the times. And I updated some of my references at the end. Not throwing shade at any YouTubers, although you would be able to use your deductive elimination to figure out who I've been talking about. But there's a lot of YouTubers out there that are actual pieces of shit, that are absolute grifters, and they're only there to make money and ride on everybody's good faith and think because they convince themselves because they've helped somebody at some point and got scammed that they don't ever have to help anyone again. And I remove those people from my references area and replace them with people that I think are good. So, or at least that haven't proven themselves to be pieces of shit. But I will just say, after you get over a certain subscriber count, you have to be very, 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 very suspicious of people's motives. And I really watch a YouTuber for a long time. If they've got over like 20 to 40,000 subs, I watch them for a long time before advocating for them. And I try to interact with them. I try to talk with them. I try to interface, network, and collab with them. In some cases, I'll talk to them for quite a while, because you have to be super suspicious of YouTubers over a couple 10,000. So yeah. So I updated that. I'm always really proud of adding new people to the references, but it really does bum me out when after a few years they prove to just be grifters. So anyway, and I like meeting new people, new friends, and collabing with new people, and finding out that there's still good people left that want to put in the work to move forward. So if you do buy a copy, check out the references section. There's a lot of great YouTubers in there. And I guess I'll leave with this for the segment. I'm always really bummed when I send a book to somebody and they're not in it. But I stopped adding people that I sent it to, because some of the people that I send them to take them and throw them away. And I think that's insanely disrespectful, because I do believe those YouTubers someday would come back if I ever got big, and I would have to tell those people to take a kite and then go fly it. Because a good YouTuber will reach down and pick people up. Even if it's just for good content, but not to just be a good person, and they'll build everybody up. And yeah, you got to make sure you're not taken advantage of, but it's nuts to me that there's so many YouTubers out there that won't even talk to anybody if they're not already a millionaire, or if they haven't already made it. That's just gross. It's just gross to me. A really good YouTuber out there will collab based on your merits, not your money and your view count. So, anyway, I've talked about that a lot before. I think I'm just going to leave that at that, and I'm going to take a break, and then we'll jump into another segment. Yeehaw.
Bulletins and comments flow. Friends and graphics would adorn simple times of long ago. Now we're left here to mourn. Bulletins and comments flow. Friends and graphics would adorn simple times of long ago. Now we're left here to mourn. Bulletins and comments flow. Friends and graphics would adorn. In our hearts they can reappear. Status updates every day. We share our thoughts so free. Now the servers fade away, but music stays with me. Trust in the wind, enjoy the moment. Live your life, back up your music files. Seriously, don't forget to back up your music files.
All right. This is topic numero dos of the show. And it was something that I had thought about last episode, but there was just no time to go into it. And so I think it's an interesting follow-on. And whenever I hear things from other places and it's stuff that I'm already thinking, that's usually a good indicator to dial in. And the topic of identity, I talk about like lefty loos a lot. And last episode I was talking about MAGAs, kind of like early stage MAGAs versus, and then I hadn't really kind of extrapolated upon what like a late stage MAGA quote unquote would be, and then I instead said America first. And I kind of wanted to like explain and define a lot of that from my perspective, and also somehow dovetail that into like how we all kind of wear a mask. We put on our armor. We have a healthy dose of insulation, buffers, and filters, and some people say it's lying, but nobody's their true self anymore. You can't be. You take all these mandated diversity, equity, and inclusion courses, at your job. It used to be like sexual harassment, don't catcall, and don't be creepy, Well, that'll be a whole other episode. I have lots of feelings about that too, because there seems to be a protected class of people at work that can still be extremely creepy. I digress. I think it's interesting that we have identity, and identity has evolved. And so I say Lefty Lose as kind of like an endearing, nice way of saying, I don't even know. Maybe I'm not consistent in how I use it. I'm not sure. But if I was talking about just like raging commies, like sometimes I refer to them as just ninjas. It's really hard to say, right? And I think it's because I've heard it say a lot, they just like pick up a different flag that day. There are true believers that believe actual, progressive values, but there's no stopping point. They just progress forever until effectively you just have massive regression. That's different from traditional the traditional values of liberalism, and how I usually wrap my brain around traditional liberalism would be like, this is going to sound so dumb, but like liberally using a bunch of salad dressing on your salad. It sounds so dumb, but like when you think of, I don't want to say their names, it's so dangerous to say names, but your traditional liberal figureheads, the old guard is another way to call them. They are not progressive at all, and there is very many well documented interviews and interactions of traditional liberals just shitting all over progressives, because they just know the new green new deal comes to mind, where they're just like, you can't pay for that, there's no money for that. Or like universal basic income, you can't pay for that. I'm not even okay, and so I have no evidence or facts or anything to back this up, but I feel like Obamacare was one of those things where there was some problems that needed to be fixed, like pre-existing conditions, which was a massive insurance scam in and of itself. I've worked for insurance several times, health insurance several times. This was a massive scam that needed to be fixed. And I wish I could go back in time and go behind closed doors and figure out how progressives managed to slip Obamacare past traditional liberals. I already, of course, know the answer to this. It's because the cabal decided and they all had to do it, because it's the slippery slope of progressivism that leads Obamacare to eventually universal basic healthcare, because healthcare is a right. Blah, 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 blah. It's not. Healthcare is not a right. We all have the right to die, not to healthcare. We don't even have the right to clean drinking water. We don't even have the right to clean air. So we certainly don't have the right to free speech or the right to keep and bear arms, which shall not be infringed. We don't actually have the right to anything other than to utterly fail and die on this planet. So certainly healthcare is not a right whatsoever in any capacity. any type, reproductive health care or otherwise. So how Obamacare or the Affordable Health Care Act, how that got past everybody, obviously the cabal. I think I remember, not, I said I didn't want to say names, but I don't even remember entirely if like Obama really liked it being called Obamacare. And certainly the gal, the stock photo face of the gal, I don't think that she wanted to be associated with it either, and eventually they took her face off of it. I think to protect her. That's not, those aren't, in my opinion, traditional liberal values. That's progressivism. And when you look at Orange Man and Musk, they're all left leaning. They're all lefty loose. And so that's where I think that's kind of how I want to breach this discussion, and saying like early stage MAGAs are center right Republican, heading into Republicania. They will rapidly attack anything that, ideologically speaking, that doesn't fit with like the direction that their frame of mind goes with. And I think I didn't get to make this point. It was already, last episode was already a long episode, but that's why I was implying, they attacked Rittenhouse, they attacked Joe Rogan. Not attack, but online attack equals complaining online about. And it's because I think in early stage Maganism, they've realized that everything has regressed so far due to compromise, and so I think they swing so far as to just like not compromising with anything. And I think it's like a defensive reaction, and then I think eventually they grow out of their chrysalis and turn into nice, beautiful butterflies that realize you can compromise a little bit, you just have to be really careful. And then they just kind of turn into America First that flies away from being Republican entirely and realizes that Orange Man, who's a lefty-loo, like I'm already doing it, Musk, who's a lefty-loo, like Tim Pool, all these center-left people, they realize that like you can be center-left and still be pro-America. And I think the far left, the commie, the ninjas have swung so far left, much like a lot of the rest of the world has, that even center left has started to look very, very, very conservative. And those later stage America First realize that there's quite a broad spectrum of people in the middle that is growing by the day, that are kind of like, let's just literally get anybody in that is going to progress America further in like America's sustainable values, versus just regressing back to, well, sliding right off a cliff, honestly, like the rest of the world is doing right now, and like we are very nearly close to doing so. Realizing that you can have a strong border, but still, vet people to come in sometimes, with a robust vetting process. You can have women's reproductive rights without just wholesale aborting millions of children, millions of babies. Like, you can have a working functional healthcare system without giving free healthcare to everybody. Back to, the Affordable Care Act. That was its fundamental flaw. You're asking a bunch of healthy people to pay for a bunch of unhealthy or unfortunate situation people. People now are realizing finally that doesn't work. Minimum wage doesn't work. Car insurance doesn't work. Health insurance doesn't work. Home insurance doesn't work. We are screwed. People are realizing that and coming back to just like pragmatically, how do we move forward and which candidate is going to get us forward. And so I think there is a lot of lefty-loo, which is left-leaning people, not commies, that are realizing gun control. They're like, oh, we let them defund the police. That was really bad. We need ways to defend ourselves. So you have what happened in Portland a couple weeks ago, where the cops were like, man, they had helicopters in the air. They had so many cops. They were shutting down those block shutdowns left and right. I've seen the video of it now from the helicopters. They were calling the ball, spike stripping them, running them down, arresting them in 12-man squads. There can be real change. But it is at a very city by city, town by town level. And Portland is one of those. I always go how can I be wrong? What does wrong look like? And Portland is a prime example of that. Yeah, they're one step away from being New Yorkistan. But Portland, who is predominantly, overwhelmingly left-leaning, they aren't all necessarily far left-leaning, and so you could very easily have America First style left-leaning liberals. And I hate to say Democrat. I think Democrat is a dead name. Ooh, I used a word. I think in almost every facet, like I was saying last episode, Republican is a very, very dead name. There aren't Republicans anymore. There's rhinos, which are just lefty-loos. That they all serve the cabal. And not that I'm glorifying liberals either. A overwhelming amount of them in leadership support the cabal. However, those elections, by and large, senators, legislators, they'll overwhelming amount of them serve the cabal, right? So just leave them alone. However, at the local level, even liberals are clamoring for their own side. They're beginning to hold their own side responsible to at least move a little bit closer to the center in terms of law, order, financial stability, getting drugs off the streets. They can only ignore that stuff. Like these fentanyl, oh, it's just terrible. Like the videos and pictures out of Portland, they can't ignore that stuff forever. And even though they act like it's not a problem, deep down, they 100% know. Like, there's videos. There's a video earlier today of two, what looked like young, normal, affluent gals in summer shopping wear that wouldn't have been out of place anywhere. Both slumped over in their, what looked at least like a decent looking vehicle. Completely both slumped over in fentanyl overdoses. It's extremely jarring, and it's like, were they attacked by somebody with fentanyl? Like, is someone waiting for nobody to look so they could be drug off and trafficked because they didn't fit that profile? I mean, you couldn't see their faces, but from what of them you could see, they looked like they were just out to go shopping. They were outside of a grocery store. Like, it doesn't make sense. And I think, much like the UK is seeing their kids being ripped apart by the violence from a certain group of people, the left, even though they get crabby and they don't want to admit when they're wrong, certainly, ever. But deep down they know. And they talk to each other. They just don't like to admit it. And slowly but surely they're starting to look for local candidates that are going to be restoring law and order and prosperity. Like, they can't afford groceries either. They can't boycott something right now if they tried because they don't have any money. They know what a recession looks like, and they know when they've been lied to. Because they've been lied to and they've been pandered to so many times. It's the same thing with minorities. They know when they're being lied to. They've been lied to so many times. That's why a certain community of Americans were vehemently opposed to the vax mandates, because they have been lied to with vaxes before. Stop Asian Hate was that way. Like, everybody knew who was being attacked by who. Like, they couldn't lie about it. Now, there's tons of videos of it. The knockout game, like, they tried to lie. Everybody knew. Like, people are really smart. The Kia boys, like, there's videos everywhere of all the muscle cars that they just jump in and have the dingle dongle, and the muscle car just starts it up there, because everyone knows the key fobs are the new key fobs are a joke. Everybody knows these things. Like you can't lie to people. You can't bullshit them. Like, people talk. They can't sow division forever. Like, everybody knows what fentanyl does now. They can't do that again. Like, they can't keep tricking the majority of people into this, like, massive racial division. Class division is probably going to come next. There's going to be the haves and the have-nots, but we honestly, the haves and the have-nots, now I've talked about this before, is going to be people with a low mortgage or no mortgage versus people with a very high mortgage / interest rate. Like, we're going to be back to that kind of like classist identity, and it's going to be very dangerous. And people are going to have to really band together and see past the identities that the media is telling us that we have to be in. And you're going to have like way more important things to laser focus in on, like Which house in your subdivision is the drug house? Those are the concerns. Those are the things to keep eyes on, because that's what brings crime in. Those are the people that are looking at your kids wrong. Those are the people that are peering into your garage when it's open to see what you've got. They start driving by really slow and giving you the side eye. Not, does your neighbor have this sign or that sign? Like, if you've got a lefty-loo neighbor, just ask them, like, hey, what's that candidate all about? You've got their sign out there. Like, I'm not trying to give you shit. Just like you see them mowing the lawn and say, hey, tell me about your candidate. What values? What are their values? What are they saying that you like? And you don't have to agree. That's the biggest thing about politics. You don't have to agree. You don't have to think, oh, that person's voting for so-and-so. They're a total lunatic. Like, they might be, and then you'd be like, oh, okay, whatever. But they might go, oh, I went to one of their rallies, and they said a lot of stuff that resonated with me, and they were saying a lot of stuff about the border I liked, or they were saying a lot of stuff about they want to bring back, XYZ businesses or something. Like you don't know based on if they have like an R or a D next to their name, or they claim that they're a libertarian and they're actually like a total moron, because the whole Libertarian Party has been completely subverted too. So I'll just say like a local example of that. There is someone, what do they say in the things now? Prefers Republican Party. That is the biggest bullshit joke on the planet. Like, the Republican Party can pretty much unilaterally 100% give somebody their endorsement, but all the other people can run as Republicans also, and it boils down to whichever one has the most money. And because they've never just given everybody a set budget and just let everybody run and just let the chips fall. Give everybody like a town square. Okay, everybody gets 3 debates. They'll be at this location, this or 4. I guess in a big state, you get one in the northwest, the northeast, the southwest, and the southeast, and maybe one right in the middle. Give everybody a fair, open square at it. Give everyone a set amount of money. Give everyone a set amount of flyers they can send out. Get rid of all the super PACs. Get rid of all the special interest groups. Get rid of all the lobbyists. And if the Republicans want to nominate one person, they can. If the Democrats want to nominate one person, they can. The Libertarians and the Green Party. And if they're, if America First wants to break away, which is completely understandable, make each group actually stand on its merits. But instead, okay, so I'm making a point here, I swear. So what happened was, this guy got the Republican nomination. He only ended up getting like 10% of the Republican votes. And someone who is a rhino Republican in name only, effectively like a lefty-loo, got moved forward for the November. And so, which means basically in November, they'll be voting for 2 left-leaning people, and a vast majority of the state has no representation. And you might think, well, Chance, how that you pass? Well, because almost nobody votes in the primary. It's a really low number. So you've got a bunch of morons voting in the primary. And that's who you're stuck with voting for in November. And so all the people that care, like me, who painstakingly take hours to try to figure out everybody's stances on everything, ignoring whether it says they prefer this party or that party, we're just screwed. There's just no point. And the people that get in just don't represent us at all. But there's still a chance that you look up what they're about, and maybe some of the things will still align, but some of them won't. If you're a single issue voter, you're probably screwed. But I think maybe I said last episode, the gal that ended up winning where I am from by almost no votes at all, by within the statistical error of margin, she won. And she ended up being, at least on paper, at least when she talks, she has ended up being very conservative, because she knows that you have to be like right in the middle now. And I think if our republic lasts another 2 years or another 4 years, I think whether they have a D or an R, you're going to see almost everywhere slide towards the middle. Because I think everyone's realizing, the vast majority of people are realizing it's the only way to get through this. So I still think you should vote. I think as equally as important as you should be talking to everybody, because we have to be able to get through this together. And everyone's wearing masks right now. They have armor. Like they have to fake who they are, because they have no representation. They have, like, through diversity and equity and inclusion and the culture war and the identity war and politics and the divisiveness, like, our identities have been buried so down deep inside just through the pure lack of representation. But yet, when you take the classes that you're supposed to take at work, they tell you to be yourself, and they tell you that everyone has to respect you for who you are. Back to the weird people doing weird things at work, which some of which I think I would substitute for the weird for gross. Sometimes cringe. I think there's people that do gross things at work. I think there's people that do cringe things at work. I think there's people that do and say weird things. But they just it's just randomly decided by HR, like, what's tolerated and what's not any day of the week. And politicians start dropping new buzzwords, and it's just like, all of a sudden the paradigm changes. It's nobody gets to be who they are, or everybody gets to be who they are. There shouldn't be any middle ground. And I think it should be that way in politics. You should be able, and religion, like, you should be able to just be who you are, and then have some measure of representation proportional to all of the other people who most closely identify with you. But that's not what we have. This country is very quickly regressing into full-blown communism, where if you don't have enough representation, whether that means you drive a Kia or you're a certain ethnicity, that all of a sudden it becomes okay to assault because the media decided that it's okay to assault this group but not that group, whether you're in America or in Europe or in other places. or in the UK. Because all of a sudden, one side's inciting hatred. And it's like, you say one side's inciting hatred, the other side's running around slashing people's heads. But you're saying that this group over here is being exterminated when they're like the most protective group there is. Then you've got this other group that attacks, does the worst, horrible, unspeakable things to children, but they're one of the most protected groups that exists. It makes no sense. You've got people being let out that do the most horrible things, and you've got other people still getting locked up for like thought crimes. Like this, we're at a crossroads right now where we're going right off a cliff because people don't have enough representation for who they really are anymore. Who you really are is not protected. You have to be continually compromising and changing who you are so that you hopefully closely align enough with a group that is protected to where you can fly under the radar for a little bit longer, but you're going to get othered eventually until there's just nobody left. That's how progressivism works. That's why the left is continually cannibalizing itself and scooting more people closer to the middle, and you get things like TERFs that are all of a sudden centrists, or all of a sudden they'll be like, no, TERFs are like far right. You're like, wait a second, like 10 years ago, those were considered like far left radical feminists. Now all of a sudden you're saying they're like far right feminists? Like, what the hell is that? And then all of a sudden you got like furries running around that were considered leftists, and all of a sudden like the furries are coming out as like anarcho, like libertarian anarchists almost. Like, I want to dress up as a furry, leave me alone or I'm gonna ghost you. It's like, well, okay. I think that's kind of the point of my books a lot, is like, as we get closer and closer to the end, everybody's like hyper individualism is going to become their greatest strength. People are going to realize legitimately, not just diversity is our greatest strength. Diversity is our greatest strength. Like, people are going to realize, like, oh shit, what makes me unique actually makes me like insanely powerful, as long as I don't get ganged up on by the moron mob. So an example of that I've brought up before is neurodivergence. Like, I feel like most of the other protected groups do not want neurodivergence to be added as a protected group, even though our brains literally work differently. Like, we are unique. We are diverse. Like, our brains are literally diverse. Like, and we literally get excluded from things. Like, this isn't a contest to see who's like excluded or included the most, but people who think and act differently don't even make it through the interview process, let alone if you need some kind of exemption, whether it be like religious or medical. At all. If you were just talking about fairness here, how hard is it to, oh man, I mean, I follow a gal on Twitter who's talking about this with like sign language all the time, and I'm learning a lot about the struggles that like deaf people go through. I mean, I know firsthand the struggles that people in wheelchairs go through, because I know that the ADA built all the ramps so the wheelchair people could get around. And then there's tents blocking the wheelchair ramps. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, like, this diversity, equity, and inclusion thing has been completely weaponized. And I'm not saying that a person in a wheelchair, that their identity is a wheelchair. But I mean, their life is modified by it. Same thing if you're deaf. You know, your environment, same like with crutches, like your environment does literally have to change if you're in a wheelchair, and it's not the end of the world. I worked at a place once, a very, very, like a 9-story building, and yeah, it was expensive. They kind of had to get some concrete saws, and they had to saw out a spot of some stone stairs, and they had to put in a lift kind of a deal so someone could get in the wheelchair. It maybe lifted them up 4 or 5 feet. They could get out of the wheelchair and they could enter the building. Goodness only knows how this building ever made it, but it's probably because there were some other parts of very obscure side entrances that were like very loosely like wheelchair accessible. But like, it is insanely expensive to retrofit a building sometimes for wheelchairs. Like, they had to completely redo all the bathrooms. Like, my point is like, there's some groups of people where heaven and earth is changed around, and maybe some are more visible than others. Meanwhile, deaf children seem to be really getting the short end of the stick. And I don't understand why that is. I think they think that they can out technology deafness, when really like the first step should be teaching them American Sign Language. Like, and then work on the technology, and then let them decide if that's what they want to do. But nonverbal communication, that's like 90% of our communication's nonverbal. Like, I don't know. I'm talking out my ass. I don't know that stuff firsthand. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to, contextualize it all, but like, neurodivergence is huge. But like, nobody puts up with me if they don't want to put up with me. They just don't have to. They just don't deal with it. Like, it took me a really long time to adjust my behaviors to even like loosely be palatable for other people to tolerate, and I still screw up all the time. And I feel like that's why I ended up hanging out with so many military people, because they can be a challenge. They're very, matter of fact, and very based and set in their ways a lot of times. And I found that I have seen personally that people just do not want to deal with them in the office, period. Not because they don't like the military, although that sometimes is the case, but because they just... Extroverts want to go hang out with other extroverts. That's just what they do, and they feel comforted and safe because they don't feel threatened by all the other people that want to talk about Star Wars and talk about, remember stormtroopers? Remember, it's just like, so they're not inclusive, but they'll sit there and they'll make everyone go to the inclusive class, and they'll preach about inclusivism, and then they'll want, we should hire more of a different ethnicity, but they never offer up their jobs. we have too many certain ethnicity. It's like, why don't you leave then? Why don't you quit and tell them that they have to go find somebody of the other Oh, you don't want to do that? Okay. So you want somebody else to quit. You want them to fire somebody else to make room for a different ethnicity, to make you feel better all of a sudden. Like, why don't you quit? Oh, because you're the ethnicity that's going to be screwed now. Okay. And it's the same thing. Yeah, it's nuts to me. I mean, if you want preference, if you want hiring preference, be a veteran. Go serve your country, then you'll get veteran preference. They tried to get rid of that in our state a while ago, and it got shut down. They were trying to make it so they didn't have to hire a certain amount of veterans anymore. And they were like, whoa. They're like, being a veteran was unfair to minority diversity hires or something. And it's just like, you guys are insane. That fell right on its face. At least that's what my memory tells me. But I think that I think all of our identities, if it isn't literally the most top identity, or at least the identity that is like the most vehemently proactive, like you're just gonna be on the chopping block unless you can protect your identity as much as possible. But protecting your identity as much as possible in the future might be being a bunch of roof Koreans or other law skirting methodologies to have enough of a defensive system to be able to mount a defense. And it doesn't help when they're trying to constantly ban radios and ban armor and ban night vision and ban... It's like, it's going to be hard to defend your identity. But you also have to remember that that's going to mean having working relationships with other identities. Whether that means religion or whatever, but I'm going to tell you what, like, political ideology is not going to exist soon. Going through my primary ballot thingy-mabob, like, Republican and Democrat, like, doesn't exist anymore. It's in name only. Either you're on the side of trying to hold the country together, or at least hold your little city together in most cases, or you are pro basically losing everything and seceding everything to whoever is going to be around and trying to take it all. That could mean the druggies, that could mean cartels, gangs, warlords, other countries. Like, you have to look around and decide if everything around you is worth keeping or not. Because there's no future for you as to who you are, let alone who you want to be, if you don't be who you are and exist through who you are and share with people who you are somehow without getting fired from your job or getting arrested. Like, and I think until you're ready to lose everything they constantly have you're at a constant disadvantage as to not being able to be who you are. Especially when on the internet, going back to kind of my points from some of my last episode, is like, they want to threaten everybody with doxing them to just shut them up. And that's what's happening in the UK right now. They want to give you a boot knock for posting online that, hey, something's wrong. There's people that aren't from here and they're lopping people's heads off. Oh, you're going to incite violence. They've tried to do that here too so many times. Words are violence. It's like, no, you can't just say that, like, hey, this identity is under attack by this identity. I mean, what do you call that? Like, if that's not, I don't know. And they say by calling it out, that by calling out one group hate attacking another group, that you're inciting hate attacks on the other group. It's like, no. But if everyone's aware, then the conversation can be had. These two cultures cannot get along. Instead of pretending like this is okay, let's have this discussion now. That could mean just two identities not getting along. Like, people that want to hurt children, I don't understand why it's tolerated. Traffickers, I don't understand why it's tolerated. I don't understand why it's even a discussion. Do you know how many people go missing every year? Why aren't we putting every resource available? Like, you want to talk about, like, modern slavery? Like, instead, they try to change the narrative and go, well, it's your group that's doing it, or your group that's doing it, instead of having the emotional intelligence to go, no, we need to compartmentalize this as a new problem, as a new group that is across these groups. And if it's a Venn diagram, you take the new Venn diagram and just like, no, nobody's allowed to hurt children, period. Like, nobody's allowed to traffic. You can't traffic. I don't get it. And it's getting worse because they are emptying prisons in America and all over the planet, and they're sending everybody here, and it's getting worse. And that's why it's starting to look like the Purge every single freaking day and night, 24 hours a day, because our country is getting destabilized. And they're just trying to scare us into not talking about it. But I want to talk about these things. I want to warn people, and I want everyone to be themselves and not be afraid. Hiding and not preparing means you're not going to be ready. And I don't know if through the universe, just talking about it or thinking about it, or even if you try to talk to one person, or just being more vigilant, I don't think any of us know what impact that has. But if you believe the power of positive energy, and like, I can tell you that we had a drug house on our street, and there was 10, 20 vehicles an hour, 24 hours a day for months and months and months and months and months and months. And it was insanely distracting. I've talked about it on my podcast before. Like, it was just super distracting, these vehicles. All hours. And I don't know what finally tipped the scale, But I know over the 4th of July, all the cops and all the fire departments and stuff all went over there and sent all their asses packing. And I think they've been slowly dismantling everything. Like, I think I feel a very real difference. And that doesn't mean like being a Karen or being, I can't think of the right word, being a snitch. I didn't snitch on anybody. But like, just being more aware, just talking to your neighbors, just having a presence, You control what you patrol. If you don't patrol, you don't control. If you're not out, if you don't have a presence, whether that means like your streets, whatever, like whatever else is out there is going to prevail. That might not mean that you have the power to do anything about it, but you will at least be aware, and you can share your awareness, and the universe is going to reconcile it somehow. So you just have to be yourself. And everyone's going to have to learn to accept everybody for real and have real, frank discussions about what's going on. Shed light in the darkness and realize some people are going to talk weird. Some people are going to be harder to understand. Some people you're not going to see from their perspective right away, but like maybe the next day or a week later, the thing that they said is going to kind of make sense because you're going to see that frame of reference. And I think the biggest mistake that we could make now is not training and practicing as if people aren't trying to wipe us out and people aren't planning on wiping us out, because they are. All this right now is a mask. Like, we're all wearing masks to protect our identities and protect who we are. But what's really going on right now is also a mask. It's a veil. If you don't think that evil is constantly planning and trying to figure out how to wipe everybody out, that's all it spends its time doing. It sits there and it festers and it builds and it grows. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, like an ant colony. And if everyone just buries their head in the sand, all of a sudden, termites have eaten your house or something. I don't know. So I've tried more to be who I really am, but also be the best me that I can be. And honestly, a lot of that just boils down to communication. Me trying to communicate better and not, be so sick with migraines and fatigue and stuff. Like, I can be a better me just by not being exhausted. I don't identify with being in like a super exhausted. I know a well-rested, normal me exists because I worked on bunker codes for like 6 straight hours last night, and it felt amazing, and I listened to music, and I was so happy, and I felt freaking great. And before I was burnt out, I used to feel like that all the time. And I would still say stupid things because I was happy and excited and felt good. But I think I would rather say stupid things being in a good mood than saying stupid things because I'm absolutely freaking exhausted and continually making mistakes and being miserable and making everyone miserable around me. I think like pride, being proud of who you are, is a valuable lesson that everybody could learn something from. But that means being honest about who you are and not being fake. Being a fake Christian, being a fake conservative, being a fake changing the flag changing your flag every time it's time to protest a new thing, changing your profile banner to the new country that's the popular hot country this month, changing your sports team every time a sports team loses and you got to root for a new sports team. Like, be yourself. Be the best you can be. And figure out how to coexist with everybody without driving everybody around you insane. And I think I've learned, that means keeping a healthy distance, not bugging the shit out of your neighbors, not bugging the shit out of your friends, but also like keeping a working open dialogue. Just be yourself. Be the best you can be. And if everybody does that and they're genuine, then you can genuinely figure out which groups of people cannot coexist and need to get sent packing. Not because you just believe a little bit different, but because you're legitimately under attack and just can't see it because you're so busy being distracted by all the stupid shit going on. Because one of these days, the veil is going to drop and it's going to be a tsunami. Again. And nobody knows what it's going to be because it's different every time. But I feel like this is all I can do, and so I'm trying to do it, and I don't know. I'm trying to be a better me, which means talking about this stuff as best as I can, and as frank as I can without not being able to say anything at all. So, I know I'm going to take a break. And then I'm going to wrap up with another indie author segment. And then that'll be the rest of this one. So back in a bit.
All night barrel time. Going to find those dirtbags. In the night we ride 100-round drum bags. Roads are smoky wild. Engines roar so loud. No stopping us tonight. We vanish in the crowd. Full auto, belches fire. Fuel the whole night's revenge desire. This place is guarded on our time. It's grown like barrel time.
Alright, this is the final segment of the show, the indie author spotlight. And this book, or this author is Sotto Voce. I think that's how you pronounce it. I don't know. English is their second language, and I'm not sure where their name is. Their name is from, so I don't know how to pronounce it. but it doesn't matter. They wrote a book. I think it's a 2-part. I haven't read part 2 yet. It's called In Aura, the Land of the Superior. And I will say, despite English being their second language, the book was flawless and extremely easy to understand. And I give it a 10 out of 10. Again, just a quick recap. These aren't fluff pieces. I'm only doing indie books that are really legitimately good 25 and under reviews. And I reviewed this while it was under the 25 mark. They're right at 25 now. They also had the added get me in the feels of them having some not nice reviews, and that leans me more towards wanting to read their book. So I want to. So next, I read the little blurb. So it's then I'll tell you my thoughts and feelings about it. In a world divided between the superior and the bereft, a desperate man must find a way to save someone he cares about. But what sacrifice does he have to make? Luke thought he'd found purpose again. After years of heartache and a devastating loss, his companionship with the strong-willed Rui gave him a reason to cherish life, even in a home plagued with poverty and disease, the origin. But when he learns about Rui's life-threatening and mysterious disease, Luke is prepared to seek help, and the only place a cure exists, Aura. Returning to Aura thrusts him into an intriguing world where everyone has achieved physical superiority and perfection. It has advanced technology and found keys to tailoring genes and eradicating diseases, but Aura's solution came with an exorbitant tag. To Aura, origin is just its arrogant but fallen ancestor, and now a defective neighbor with nothing to offer. They could save Rui, but what is the cost that Luke has to pay? And I won't spoil. Oh, and it says that this is a beefy book, first of all. And it says typical time to read 8 hours and 23 minutes. I would not let that discourage you, and I'll say why first and then go into more detail. The pacing of this book is really, really, really good. It's not a slow burn. However, it takes a while to explain why things are important, so they have the adequate gravity later to understand. I feel like there's a couple things. Probably if I had read this and paid more attention, it would have made sense sooner. But most of these sci-fi, it's like, oh, there's the floating station, and those are all the haves, and we're down in the gutter, and we're the have-nots, like every single sci-fi ever. I think this has it sounds weird, but the fact that the haves and the have-nots are actually kind of like on the same planet, and you could actually like relatively get back and forth. For some reason, that's like a really novel concept that most of the sci-fi books, if not all the sci-fi books that have the haves and have-nots, they don't really just have them kind of geographically in like reachable areas. However, the two sides really don't mix. And there's a lot of different reasons for that the book explores. But they have like a relative working-ish relationship. And it's so crazy to me that they always have these like haves and have-nots, and you can't get up to the space station. They're just too good for you. And it's like, well, they could fix this all. Yeah, but they're not going to. Over and over. And you're just like, well, what if somebody could go there and get fixed? You know, like, and it's always like that with Star Trek. You know, they fly around in their ships and they wave. I feel like there was an episode of Next Gen where it's like, do any of the doctors in Star Trek actually know how to fix anybody? Or is it all just like magic bullshit? And in the 24th century, they don't really know anymore. They do. And I thought that, but they get to the point to where it's just a hollow doctor and they stick him on a bed and have the magic wand wave over him. And you're just like, oh, so they could just literally cure anything. That's kind of like what Aura, I'll call them the haves, they could fix anything. And so if you need to go get medical attention, as long as you can afford it, because it does take resources and time and effort and staff, you could just go there and get healed. It's a crazy concept that like shouldn't be unique and innovative, but I found it to be like interesting. And then you also have like, we'll say like the have-nots, but the have-nots are kind of just doing okay. They're not doing great, but they're not doing terrible. There's, good people and bad people, but most everyone's just kind of working and getting along, and towns and settlements and stuff, they're not like crazy advanced or anything, but they're not really like backwater. They're kind of like a backwater society, but I don't know. It's more realistic, I think. I don't know. It's hard to explain, maybe, I guess, but I really liked it. It was believable. It was grounded. Everything in it was really grounded. The technology was grounded. Everyone's behavior was grounded. Everyone behaves the way that you'd expect them to behave. There wasn't this moronic manufactured tension that I just can't stand. It was perfect. I read the whole thing, all 8 hours of it, and like the only criticism I had is I was like, hey, you you used the word Band-Aid once, and Band-Aids don't exist in your world, so don't forget, adhesive bandage. For just a massive, epic 8.5 hour story, for that to be like, for English as like a second language, like for that to be the only, it's crazy. I don't know how nobody's ever found out about this book. I don't know how this book doesn't have tens of thousands of readers. I just don't. And I don't want to get into a big tirade. I kind of do, but I kind of don't. It's again called In Aura, The Land of the Superior, and there's a part 2 that I plan on digging into. Go check it out. Ask your library to stock it or something. It's an amazing book. So, by Sotto Voce, although I understand it could be Voce. I don't know. Also, it's a funny thing when I'm reading it out loud. The character's name, Rui. My brain sees that, and it has a way of saying it that I realize that I can't actually verbalize. So I think that's kind of interesting. It has like a very kind of otherworldly aesthetic to it, but it's very believable and very grounded. So anyway, In Aura, and I'll leave a link. And yeah, that's it for this episode's Indy Spotlight. And if you have any suggestions for any under under 25 review authors that that don't have a publisher and aren't lying about the genre that their book's in, hit me up. And they might make it on a future episode. So with that, we'll roll the outro, and I'll talk to you all on the next one. Bye-bye.
There's just not a whole gentle. We have financial or any other advice. Advice about anything. Overlook an abandoned bunker. Let's go. Let's go. Found a bunker deep in the woods. Supply stacked high, it feels so good. Hiding out neath the leafy hood. Gonna help others try to get through. Got a radio in my hand. Try to reach out across the land. Get the antenna up as high as I can. Being left alone, my only plan. Speak out loud across the world. Sending signals through the air. Gonna help and gonna care. Try to help get everyone squared. People scattered near and far. Lights shining out like a distant star. Feel the static through the dark. Common friends to help restart. If we band together, we should pull through. From my bunker, I can help you. Sending help, tell you all that I know. So grab a drink and enjoy the show. Speak out loud to the world. Sending signals through the air. Gonna help and gonna care. Even though life seems unfair. Got a radio in my hand. Try to reach out across the land. Get the antenna up as high as I can. Being left alone, my only plan. Speak out loud to the world. Sending signals through the air. Gonna help and gonna care. Even though life seems unfair. People scattered near and far. Lights shining out like a distant star. Through the static, through the dark. Common friends to help restart. If we band together, we should pull